Okay, I've got a Sony tape deck, dual tape deck here, TC W290, looks like a 1990s model. It's all soft touch, DC servo controlled motor, which I guess is a reference to that. No idea what's actually wrong with this one, but at least has a power light on it. So what we can do is actually, should be able to press up, there's a set of switches here and some, I'm not sure why it's got so many on there, probably for the metal tape and stuff. This has more got just a couple, actually they are over to one side, they're not in the middle. But if we hold, let's try pressing play, nothing happens. If we press those switches up and press play, we've got something happening here, making a bit of a noise, but we do seem to have take up and our capstan running. Well, we did. Rewind. Fast forward working. Yeah, it's trying to go into play, but not succeeding. Yeah, it actually started for a bit there. It's making a bit of an odd noise as well, something rattling there. Well, that's that deck. Try the other side here. Nothing seems to want to go there. If I press just those two switches, so the two we've got take up quite a bit of it, so that's a good sign. Yeah, but when I put a tape in, it's not actually turning. It seems to rewind and fast forward, but it actually reel looks a little bit out of whack, like it's not centered, but yeah, the actual capstan isn't even pulling any tape through, so that's interesting. I might even try another tape. I don't know how good this old one is. It's a 90, so it's probably a pretty solid tape, pretty high tension one. Okay, so I've basically removed the front panel, which I've got over here, just with the power switch connected, so we can at least power this thing up. And I've unscrewed the mechanisms from it, so I've got the mechanism separate here, so I can actually run these completely out in the open, although I need to press the buttons on this to do it, so I'll try and set this out and have it without shorting anything out, and of course it doesn't want to work. Switches are pressed. Oh, we'll pull the plugs out now. Is that correct? I'm sure that's correct. Yeah. Pretty shit design, isn't it? Definitely on. Oh, there we go. Yep, so we've got it going, and it's just stopped. Yes, the pinch. If I push the pinch roller, it's actually going. Like it hasn't got, yeah, it hasn't got quite enough pressure. Yeah, I've actually got to push the deck up to get it to, even then it's not running the best. But at least it is running. Grease everywhere. Grease Push the eject button. Controller could do with a lube maybe, but it's fairly free. Yes, that's odd they're both doing that. Yeah, again, if I press on it, we're getting a bit of... That's not the happiest. Oops, ejects there. Why they put grease on them, I don't know, but... Why doesn't that want to come open? Yeah, because the deck hasn't fully shut off. Yes, there's another problem maybe. Yeah, it's done it now. So these decks are pushed up by these gears on the back. I'll have to turn the power off and unplug this a bit to show you. Basically there's a large gear on the deck which is run off the capstan. So something first has to trigger it to actually engage with the capstan, which I thought a lot of the older decks used to use a solenoid to do that, but I don't think this has got any solenoids on it. So I'm not sure what actually triggers that. There's a lever here which maybe has something to do with it. Must be something to do with it. Or is that just the cam to move the idler around, I think? Yeah, so that's engaged now. And the deck has gone up. But once it's up it seems to jam, so something else. There's a pin there. It seems to be the engagement. But once it goes up, it should stay up and the capstan should keep rotating. I'm actually hitting something here. Like the pins come to the end of the cam or whatever, so we've got a real motor, so I wonder if they're using that in some way to trigger things. Oh, it isn't actually a real motor, I don't think. I think that's just related to getting the drive going. Plug that back in. So I'll a couple of those up. Are we on? There we go. Yeah, it is this central motor by the look of it. So that's rotating. Okay, this is a lever. Okay, so we've got this central motor here which looks like a real motor but it's not. It's got a gear coming out of it and there's like two half gear type setups here. Oh, you can see the mechanism down in here. So we've got this little gear on it and this swinging little idler piece between the two decks. Then there's this sort of gear here which is like a pivoting gear, and it's got like a tooth section on this curved bit here, so obviously if that swings across and rotates the motor, that'll drive that gear down, which then must, let's flick back up now. So I push that down and turn the capstan, I might be going the wrong way. Oh, here we go, the deck's starting to rise, but here it goes. Yeah, so now we have capstan rotating, we have take-up reel going, our capstan and pinch roller are engaged, heads are up. Now I'm guessing that if we swing this back across again, yeah, the deck's heading back down, the heads are heading back down I should say. Yeah, now we've disengaged. So yeah, this little swing arm here, I swing that across and rotate the arm down. The capstan's always running in these, I believe. Yeah, it hasn't engaged fully. What are we doing? I'm probably not running it quick enough. If I let the capstan go the right way, yeah, I do. So at the moment we've got the reels connected, but we haven't lifted the heads up, so that's a bit odd. That should, yeah, let's drop the deck back down. And we'll engage it, and that's, I think I've got to hold it there to get the heads to rise. Yeah, oh, we're in reverse now. That's interesting. So I'm not quite sure how this mechanism works. Now we've disengaged. Yeah, it's dropped out of whatever it was in. But that's basically how this works. This central motor spins one way or the other. So I guess they run it forward or clockwise to engage the left deck. And if we eject this, if they run it the opposite way, then we engage the gear on the other one, on the right deck. Yeah, that's the right way for the capstan. So here comes the deck. Heads are lifted up. Pinch rollers engaged. Take-up reels running. If we give this another flick, yeah, head goes back down, and we're disengaged. Give that a run again. Yeah, for some reason when I do it the second time it engages the take-up but doesn't lift the head, so there may be multiple modes involved here. I think I know where that clicking sound's come from. Maybe this gear's actually got a split in it. This little central gear on this motor, oh yeah, it comes right off. So that's got a tiny little crack in it. That's probably the main problem with this deck. So I wonder if that's slipping before the deck's fully engaged. I don't know. But it looks like we need to fix that. It's possible that could be something to do with the pinch roll or not. But that may just be this tape I've got too. It doesn't feel particularly tight. That should run fine. So it's quite possible this little gear here's, because it's split, that when the motor's trying to fully lift this other bit up, it's getting most of the way, and then as the torque goes up, the resistance or whatever, it's starting to slip, so it may not be fully engaging something there. So I think what we'll have to do is we'll pull this little gear off, clean the inside of the gear, clean the shaft on the motor, get rid of it, make sure there's no grease or oil or anything on there, and then I'll just use a bit of Araldite and we'll just glue that back on. That's usually strong enough to hold them together, these plastic gears, onto a bit of metal, and that might actually fix this thing. I'm just going to remove this little gear which has a split in it, just by sliding that up the shaft, being careful not to drop it and lose it. I'll just get a cotton bud with a bit of methylated spirits on it, and we'll just clean the actual shaft there. Make sure there's no grease or oil on that. The gear itself, I might have to try and poke something up the middle of that. Not sure if I can get a bit of paper or something up there. Yeah, I might be able to poke that up with a very fine screwdriver, jeweler's screwdriver. Yeah, there's a bit of muck there on that. Just try and clean the inside of the gear out with some paper towel with a bit of methylated spirits, and it's fine. That's got the inside of it. So I just want to be 100% sure there's nothing slippery there. And then I'll just use a bit of, I've only got the ultra clear Araldite epoxy resin glue. So this is the slow setting 24-hour stuff. But I'll put a little dab of that on there. So we've got a spinning bit here, so that's going to make it a little bit more difficult. Because I can't afford to glue this idler that moves. And that sits right behind it, so it makes it quite difficult. Might have to put a little bit of glue inside the actual pulley and wipe it off at the back. And I need a tiny little blob for this, but I do need to mix some up for another job, so I'll make a bit more than I need to. I've got a little screwdriver there. More than enough for this job by a long shot. Yeah, I'll try and get some down in the hole. That's it. And I won't be able to poke that in with the shaft. That's it. And then I'll wipe the back of the gear off so it can't glue to that idler. Probably sits out a bit from it anyway. Let's see. Oh, yeah, that's over the idler. I think that's about the right position. It's not too hard against the idler. Might have to come a little bit forward even. Let's play there. Gears in alignment. So yeah, I'll just keep an eye on that it's not going to glue the actual idler in place as well. I might even put a little bit of glue on where that split in the gear is. Oops. Yeah, just to fill that in, not where the actual teeth are, but just in front of the teeth. And even a little bit onto the shaft. Just to hold that in place. Yeah, so I have to let that set for 24 hours. Even longer is probably better. And that should hopefully fix that, but whether the decks are going to lift up properly and pull the tape through is another thing and remains to be seen, but we'll get the glue in place and we'll go from there. Okay, so I've let the glue set for 24 hours or a bit more than that, I think now it is. I think I did it in the morning, so we're here in the evening of the day after. So that seems to be running alright, so I'll have to try putting this long tape in again and just see if it actually will. It's already going into some sort of mode. Let's reset itself now. So I'll see if this actually, oh look at that, it actually is running the tape now. Before it didn't seem to have enough pressure on the pinch roller to actually run this long tape, this 90-minute one, but now it's working fine. So it must have been a slippage in that gear, wasn't quite getting it where we wanted it, although it's just cut off for some reason there. Oh no, maybe it's doing it again. Oh well, that was short-lived. Yeah, no, it's slipping again. Oh well, that'd be typical of this stuff, and it's running fine now. Oops, I must have pressed something there. Deck hasn't reset. It's working fine now. I'm not sure what's going on there. Try the other deck maybe and see what happens. Eject. No, that one seems to be not running. You give it a press and away it goes again. So something's still not quite right here. And something's making a bit of a clicking noise. Might be that capstan, I think. That side seems to work alright, so I'm not sure if there's something else in these decks because they haven't been used for a while that's stopping them from fully engaging. That one's working now. That reel, whoops, definitely looks like it's been bent a bit off centre. Could just be the cassette. But anyway, that seems to be running at the moment. Now the next question is what's making that noise? I don't need to shut the door, do I? Seems to be that side. What I'll do there, I'll take the belt off the idler. That seems to be quiet. No, we've got that noise back again. Seems to be something to do with the because the capstans are both running. So again, if we remove the idler belt, we shouldn't put a tape in there because it's going to chew it. Yeah, no sign of noise. So there seems to be a slight noise in the reel unit somewhere. Yeah, obviously a fairly plastic sort of tape deck I think these ones are. They're not up to the usual Sony standard. Got a crack in it as well, is that my imagination? Yeah, the front of that gear almost looks cracked as well. Possible. In play mode. Oh yeah. I wonder if that's moved forward or something. Matches the supply reel okay. All the grease seems fine. Still good condition, not sticky. Better put that. That's the other one. Put the belt back on. Plug that back in. Try a different tape here. Old commercial one. It seems to be pulling through okay. Yeah, they don't want to go. Yeah, I think those black plastic gears may actually be the problem. Yeah, that one looks like it's got a little split in the front of it, and the other one looks like it's got two splits. So I think it's these black idler gears that swing across in the middle here. They're actually making a slight noise because there's a split in these front teeth where the metal shaft goes through, which would be enough to make them slightly noisy. I could try and see if it slides on the shaft, I guess, but I don't really want to loosen it off. It might be alright. It's just got that little noise because I think, yeah, it looks like, yeah, definitely the couple of their teeth are a bit further apart than the others by the look of it, just because there's a split and then there's another little split that doesn't actually separate. That one goes up almost up the centre of a, or too near the centre of a tooth, whereas this other one's a split between the teeth. Yeah, same on this one between the teeth, so it's likely that a couple of those teeth here, they definitely look like they're a bit wider apart. So I think that's why that's making that noise. But I'll give this thing a clean while it's apart. It's actually fairly clean anyway. Heads are pretty damn good. A little bit of muck on them. This actually looks like it's, oh no, it doesn't have two erase heads. I thought it had for a minute, but only one's a real erase head, I think. Capstans are nice and clean. This doesn't really look like it's had much use at all. And any use it's had, at least we can access the, any use it's had has been with good tapes. This, you can see where the tapes have been, but there's no brown iron oxide on there. At least we can get to the pinch rollers easily while it's apart, and just spin them round by hand as we clean them. Go over the capstan just to make sure now. Yeah, they do. That one's not too bad, but this one does feel a bit stiff, to be honest. So they've got a little plastic clip on the end here. So very carefully remove that. I'll try not to damage it. I wouldn't be surprised if the grease on these is a bit beyond it. I'll clean those shafts up and re-grease them. That could be something to do with the tape not always pulling through. Don't know if I can get a little bit of paper towel or something in there just to try and get any grease out of the inside of the sort of bushing up the centre of the pinch roller. Oh, that'll get in there and get a bit of it out anyway. Just make sure you don't leave any paper in there. Get that little bit there. I'll let the metho dry out on that one while I get the other one off. Just very gently prise these off on one side. Just one of these little washers with three little pieces that stick in a little bit. Oh yeah, that's quite stiff, that one. So you never know when these things have been sitting around for years. Something may well be starting to seize up in them. So it's best to just remove all old grease. The grease on the actual mechanism seems alright, but these pinch rollers, not so good. So just get that down inside the sort of bushing thing there and remove any grease. I'll probably have to give these a clean again now. I've probably got grease on my hands. I certainly will in a minute when I find the grease and put a little bit of fresh stuff on there. Because it's gone missing. I've got some of the other stuff that'll do. Just gently put a bit of grease around the shaft on each side. Only want a small amount. You don't want it coming out the other side when we push the roller on. Definitely don't want any grease anywhere near the cassette and the face of the pinch roller. And it spins quite freely. And so does that one. So now we'll get these little clips, should just push back on. Just pull up, make sure they're seated. Oh, get on there. We should have that door shut. The other one went on easily. You can just use your fingernails to, and again, pull up, make sure it's actually clipped on. And now we'll just go over these pinch rollers again and make sure there's no grease on the face of them. Make sure we haven't got any on the capstan shaft or anything. It certainly moves a bit more freely than it did. Okay. It seems to be running fine. Still a bit of a clicky noise, but like I say, I think that's those black plastic gears. So you could order new ones of those. I get a funny feeling the more I think about that, I've had to fix one of these Sonys once before, and it involved putting new gears in it. Yeah, it certainly rings a bit of a bell the more I think about it. But you'd have to order that whole new part from Sony. This is only just an old deck I got to have a play with, so I'm not going to be going to the level of worrying about a little bit of a clicking noise in it. It'll probably just end up sitting on a shelf to look at, and that's about it. But yeah, it's slightly annoying. It's not particularly loud. but eventually those gears might actually break and start slipping on the actual shafts, in which case it'll probably start chewing tapes, or it'll probably fail in the rewind fast forward first. But that does actually seem to be going again. So it's a matter of putting that. I'm going to have these ejected to get them into the front. Bit of an odd design. Yeah, they only just go together. Move that plug. We'll have to unplug everything. Give me some length here. Yeah, does that look right? That's up against the eject. This isn't sitting in there, it goes. Now, part of the deck was just screwed to the bottom, so I only had 3 screws along the top of the deck holding it to the front until you screw it back down to the base. So they're pretty... had them down to the minimal amount of things to hold things together in these days. Unlike the old decks, which had a ton of different screws and stuff to undo. Ah, one thing I didn't do, tape counter belt. Always a trick. Always forget to put the tape counter belt on. Now, can I get that on here? Hopefully. Drop the mechanism back a bit. That's it. Hopefully that's our belt. So that's got to go around the reel and then around the counter pulley there. Yep, just make sure that turns the reel, which it does. Make sure these little locating pins are in place. I think they just push on that, so that's okay. Make sure your eject buttons are right. Oops. Is this actually magnetic? No, it is. Get in there. Okay. So that's the deck attached to the front. Just make sure the ejects work, which they do. The deck is a little loose because the bottom's not attached yet. But once we fit this back on the case, the wires are out of the way. Yeah, gone through the eject mechanism, haven't they? Fiddly thing. Oh, there it is. Okay. So I've got 4 screws along the bottom here to hold the deck to the case. These metal screws. And there's another screw in the front panel itself. I think there might be some in the front feet as well. shorter screw maybe. Yeah, in the front feet. What do I do with the other one? There's a black one there. Maybe it did. Oh, I must have had a black one there, I reckon. Centre one's black just to look pretty. That makes sense. Now I need to plug everything back in. That goes there. It's our lead level meter, I think, yeah. That's our heads or something. That goes in there. And I knew there was something else, red wire. Definitely heads. And then all these wires. Orange one's just a test point. I'm knocking stuff on the floor everywhere. Just make sure they're seated home. That's good. Yeah, so I've got a little thing to hold the cables in place there. Another one here. Just to keep them tidy. Running, we've got a bit of VU meter flicking here. Oh, we did have. There it goes. That's a good sign that there's audio there. Eject. Dolby. Yeah, both channels are coming and going a bit, so try rewinding it right back to the beginning. Always a good test of the reels and stuff. If they've got plenty of torque, they should get the tape right back to the beginning with no problem. Okay. Easy. Where's that other tape gone? I'm going to hit the floor. Yeah, that one seems to be playing now okay. So I think this thing's fixed. I'm safe to put our doors back on. Deck B, is that deck B? I assume it is, yeah, because that's the middle. I have to try and work out how they go back on. That's it. Oh, good. So yeah, it's going to need a new power cord. And I guess the next thing is just to hook it up to an amplifier and make sure it's actually got sound. Okay, I've got it hooked up to an amplifier and some old cassette here. Some cheesy pop music by the sound of it. Got our level meter up and running. Up around the ODB mark as it should be. tape counter's running. Try the other deck. Okay, the other thing I might try recording a bit on it. That's the record deck. Synchro dubbing. Well, that's not doing synchro dubbing. Oh, maybe we'll hit record, that might be the button. Do I have to put it on pause? That's it, maybe. The normal record light up and running. Yep, so that's what I just recorded. Yep, so I'd say that's a working deck, other than a little bit of a noise in the gears. And yeah, it needs I'll have to find another 2-pin power cord to put on it. But anyway, that gives you an idea of how these soft touch or electronic touch controlled decks work. DC servo control motor, as they call it on the Sony. And yeah, it looks like it was just mainly that gear that swung back and forwards, or swung the other gear, the one on the motor which ran the main gear that went from deck to deck to get them actually loaded up. We've just pressed something there. That seems to be the main problem with this deck. And yeah, pinch rollers are a bit sticky, the grease on those. But yeah, other than that, I'd say she's a going deck, not that they're much use these days. But this would have been a reasonable deck back in the day. Probably not cheap. It's got the Dolby B and C, so they could actually, these later 90 decks actually didn't do too bad a job if you recorded off a CD. You could actually get quite a decent sound off tape, at least for a while, if you used a metal or chrome tape. Which, you know, quite expensive. I think it was around $10 or something for a metal tape back in the late 80s. But they did actually record pretty well, and you could almost get CD sort of quality sound, at least for a while. I don't think tape, normally the sound quality goes down with time. But anyway, that's a going deck.